Hey YouTube, welcome to another video. In this episode, I just want to share how I move my controller from under a specific Omada site, local area network, to the wide area network side of it. I received a few inquiries in the past on how I have my lab set up, so I figured to share this process in preparation for my future videos. Note that for typical home use, there is little to no benefit to moving the controller outside of the usual LAN. But for my purposes, it makes it easy for me to set up future lab scenarios. Let me show you the plan setup and share more information. This is my goal setup for my lab, moving my controller from being under a specific site local area network to the wide area network side of it. The idea is to decouple the controller from being tied to a specific lab gateway. For example, in here you can see I have multiple gateways in here. I have multiple sites, site A, site B, site C, and site D. And then I have here a gateway router A, gateway router B, gateway router C, or gateway router D. One of the major advantage for the lab setup, for me at least, is that I can have multiple gateways with the same IP network scheme. As you can see here, although it differs in the subnet mask, it's the same 192.168.0 network. And I can also have a completely different IP network. You can see here it's 172.16 network, and the other one is 10.0 network, and all of them will not require a dedicated controller under them. It's just a shared controller OC300 for all of these sites. This setup makes it easy for me to create future videos and configure future lab scenarios, because whenever I need an OC300, I don't need to set up a VPN or port forwarding. For example, if this controller is in here and I would like to set up site B, I need to make sure that I have access to the controller in this particular one, so I can either create some weird local area network forwarding in between the two gateways, or I can punch a hole to the VPN or to port forwarding. So I don't want to do that, and this particular setup solves that. Another advantage of this is that it completely isolates my controller from any local area network ACL errors that I might accidentally do. So if I do something wrong on my local area network, it only affects the local area network and not the controller itself, because the controller is on the one side of things, and oftentimes, unless you configure the ACL to affect the wide area network, the wide area network is not affected by LAN ACL. And even if I made the mistake, it makes it easy for me to recover my configuration, because the OC300 is outside the LAN ACL scope of any specific site. All I have to do is just plug in my management PC or my admin PC directly to the OC300, and I can regain access to the OC300, making it easy for me to reset back any changes on my affected sites. And whenever I'm doing a network reset or a full reset of a site, it only affects a specific site rather than affecting my controller as well. And finally, one of the great advantage of having this setup, particularly for my case, is that it's very easy for me to move one device to another. Of course, you also have to move the cable. For example, these two sites in here, site A and site B, they have the same IP scheme. So if my network devices are using the same IP scheme, I can just quickly move one device from here to here, and all of these devices like the switches, the access points, will not lose any access to the OC300, because as far as the network devices are concerned, they are still communicating with the same controller with the same host IP. And just a word of caution, if you're using a next-gen LAN configuration and you plan to do this, the next-gen LAN configuration is my take on the zero trust network kind of things, because it doesn't really trust anything. Since this Omada controller is still using a private IP, you can see here 192.168.100.100, that means there is still a separate layer 3 functionality that happens on top of this particular setup, and next-gen LAN will block that access if you're using a next-gen LAN configuration. And finally, before I forgot, this particular setup is not really required for typical or normal home or lab use. If somehow these use cases are beneficial for you, then by all means do that. But for typical normal use, it's not required. It's not really needed. Having said that, let me just move on to my current setup. Remember, this is the goal. This is what I wanted to achieve. Let me show you my current setup. For those who have been watching my previous episodes, This one will not be new to you. This is the basic home LAN wherein I implemented dedicated management LAN, and I move my controller in there along with the network devices. With this move, what's going to happen is there will be no more VLAN 100 in the site. So let me move to that particular sign. You can see that I'm going to delete my management VLAN in here. I will still have a management VLAN which is going to be in the form of a system VLAN, and that's why the IP addresses of the devices will become 192.168.0 networks. And you can see here that my device will still remain the same IP address. To minimize any errors that I might make, I still retain that particular IP address for my controller, and this device and my gateway will communicate via this port expander. There is a separate layer 3 device on top of this one, but for the purpose of this video, the controller will logically be connected to the gateway to this IP network in here. Before I move on with the actual configuration, let me just go to the list of devices that I have in here. So in this view, you will see that I have several devices in here, but you don't really have to worry about all those devices. For now, we only have the ER605, the OC300, the two switches in here, and the EAP235 wall as my Omada devices. I do have supporting devices in here, and I will cover that in a bit. But this one, as you can see, I have a single uplink to the wide area network. These two cables connects to the switches in here, the SG2210MP, and my OC300. This one you can see it's connected to port 7 of the SG2210MP switch. As for this particular uplink, this one connects to my port expander in here. This is a managed switch. This is not Omada, but I don't want to keep pulling this cable to any of the ports in here, so I figure I'll just use this, and I can move this cable around during my future videos. As for this one, this is where I'm going to put my OC300 and connect it in here. This one is currently connected to my private wide area network. As you can see here, there's a single uplink in here, and I have configured another 192.168.100 network in this particular device. These are the devices that I have. I have an ER605, two switches, SG2210MP, and one access point, EAP235 wall. One thing that you will notice in here is that the IP address for the network devices are different in here other than the gateway, and that is because I am using a different management VLAN for the network devices, which I covered on my previous video, this one. Hey there, this is the future me pausing this video for a short moment. I am adding this warning message after the original recording. First, I want to remind you that this process is completely optional. You do not have to move your controller outside of your LAN. Next, this process can completely break or destroy your network. Moving your controller outside of its default location can break your network. And last but not the least, the steps outlined here will vary based on your system. If you have not seen my video about creating and changing VLAN management, and you have your controller configured at the system default VLAN 1, you will need to change the IP address of your controller before transferring it. Then you will need to use ODU to point your Omada devices to the new controller. That is not the complete step. If you need more information, I highly suggest you watch my previous video regarding creating and changing the default VLAN management for Omada. Now let's get back to the regular programming. To start the cutover, in order for me to move the controller out of this 192.168.100 network, you can see here my controller is at 192.168.100.100 IP address. It's in the same network as these guys. I need to first move all these devices to the system default VLAN. After that, I'm going to change the IP network of the management VLAN, and once I do that, once I change the IP network, I will lose access to this controller. I will have to do a live cutover of the controller from its old port, which is located in one of the switches in here, port 7, to the external port expander, so the external hub or switch that I have, which is, if you're looking at the mini screen, this one. I'm going to move the controller here to one of the ports here. So this one is my private wide area network. I will just do the changing of the management VLAN really quickly. If you would like to learn more about the changing of the management VLAN, I highly suggest you watch the previous video. I'll leave the link in the description. if you're wondering what I'm doing here, I'm just checking if the IP addresses has reflected. So it seems like everything has reflected and everything is still connected to the controller. So what I'm going to do is do a live cutover. I'm going to change the IP network scheme of the management VLAN from 192.168.100 into something different. And the reason for that is because this IP network already exists outside of the local area network. So this is already defined on the wide area network. And in order for the gateway to see this, I will need to disable this on his scope, on his domain. Ping 192.168.100.100 SD. So that's the first thing I'm going to do for troubleshooting and for debugging. I'm going to change the IP network now. So once I change the IP network here, this ping will fail. I'll call it 99. Once I click update here, I will also lose connectivity to the controller, so I'm making sure that everything is perfect. 99, 94. Click save. So it's succeeded, and now I'm checking it here. It's request timed out because that network doesn't exist anymore. However, my controller is still having that IP address. So this is my controller. It's currently connected here to the management VLAN. I removed it here. Now I'm going to move it here. Go. Move back to my console, and as you can see here that I can already ping the 192.168.100 network, which is this particular controller. Now if I do a refresh, everything should be connected. There you go. Now I can remove the management VLAN in here. First I need to go to the switches to remove the access port definition on these switches. All the access port has been updated, so now I can remove that VLAN. This one, so I'll delete this. Yes, and there you go. So now that the controller is outside of the ER605 local area network, I can easily create multiple sites, and all the Omada devices there can easily be pointed to this particular controller. So I already created several sites in here. Let's say the ER707. You can see here that I have 3 devices in here, and I can manage them, and even have a firmware update in here, so it seems. And I have another one which is the 7206. In this particular case, I only have 1 device in here. So this one is just a placeholder, and this is my root network. So let's go to the placeholder. So this is the placeholder. I don't have any device in here. As for my root network, this is just my ER8411 and the distribution switch. All of these are pointing to this particular network, and you can see here the IP address here is 10.0.0.1, 10.0.0.101 for these devices in here. This IP network exists out of all these devices in here. And there you go. And I think that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you like this video. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you don't like this video, please give it a dislike. But do let me know what I can improve or what you dislike on this video, so that I can make those changes in the future. Thank you very much for watching the video. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you and bye bye.